welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some not really fantasy with my friend Charles.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy adjacent stuff with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy adjacent stuff today. We are hard at work reading the Farseer trilogy right now. That third book is just way longer than the other two. So a behemoth indeed. Some of us have finished reading it, but others of us are still working on it, and that's okay. We don't want to rush anybody.
We won't say any names.
It won't say any names. Some of us kept on a pretty good, even reading schedule, and some of us fell a little behind to indulge other reading projects.
Some of us disappeared for an entire week.
But we're not going to name any names. There's, things going on both sides, but that's okay because we're enjoying that series. We're savoring it. And meanwhile, we're back. And we're back today to talk about something that we both randomly read. Like, we didn't plan to read it around the same time. We just both happened to have read this book within close proximity to each other. And while we're giving ourselves more time to read Farseer, it's like, hey, we both read this book. We could do a book discussion on it. And it's not exactly a fantasy series. It's not a fantasy series at all, but a very popular literary fiction book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
Yeah. And, we're here to talk about stuff that's relevant to fans of fantasy. We are friends talking fantasy. And that's why we're going to do this in sort of framing of should fantasy fans read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Because if you're like me, a lot of times you get caught up in your SFF, fantasy, little science fiction reading, and you can almost forget that there's all of these books out there that are not in either of those genres. And it's like you hear about these capital F fiction books coming out that everyone's talking about, but then you're like, but I'm a fantasy reader, and you don't end up picking that up. I mean, it's possible you're a super diverse reader and all of that, and you already read this, but definitely, even for years, I would hardly pick up anything that wasn't SFF. So I ended up loving this book, as did you, Charles, and I think that it's a great moment for us to be able to talk about the extent to which this is a good fit for all of you awesome fantasy fans out there.
For sure. I mean, everyone listening and everyone recording right now are lovers of the fantasy genre. But, we love just storytelling as a whole. And it's rare when a book like this gains so much notoriety that maybe something more niche in the fantasy genre has a hard time reaching, and then has a broader appeal and is catered to a mass audience of people, not just avid readers, but people.
Jimmy Fallon,
not
just avid readers, but Jimmy Fallon,
and people who watch Jimmy Fallon. So it's kind of wild that you get a book like that, and this was a New York Times bestseller, obviously, but a Goodreads Choice Award for Best Fiction back last year in 2022. And it's kind of just stayed in the zeitgeist. And I've had people recommend this to me. They know that I like to read. And they're like, oh, have you read this? And I think it's an easy recommendation because something that's also kind of rare. I mean, there's New York Times bestsellers every day and Goodreads Choice Awards winners every year. But what's interesting about this book is that it's a lot about video games and forming friendships over video games. So I think everyone that knows me, maybe even at the most base level, knows that I enjoy video games quite a bit. So you've got my mom and just coworkers being like, hey, you like video games, right? Have you read this? And so that's happened enough times that I was happy to pick it up. And that to me is one of the more interesting things about it. And I think that's why, when we talk about, is this right for fantasy readers? Like, how do we bridge that gap from fantasy to like this massive literary fiction phenomenon, and what we can kind of branch out and enjoy from this book? And for me, that was the start of it. And let's be real here. Is there any greater fantasy than like starting a video game company with your friend in college and becoming massively successful? I mean, what better fantasy is there than that?
Yeah. The only thing that I can think of is starting a fantasy podcast with your lifelong friend, and if only.
Or finding out you're a
success
chosen one and
riches.
getting to like ride a dragon and use magic and stuff.
Yeah.
And that you have
But
like
that seems more realistic
vast
than
wealth in Diagon Alley that you could just
yeah.
just have
But
tons
all
of
that is
gold
more
somewhere.
realistic than making massive riches as a fantasy podcaster. Let's be real. But
Massive
anyway,
riches as a video game developer is pretty close.
That's
It's
possible.
close. Mm-hmm.
But it's possible. There's precedent, and anyway,
That's true.
I ought to mention I've also had this book recommended to me, not necessarily from the perspective of like, hey, you like video games, which I do, of course. Charles and I have many fond memories of
Yeah.
like every weekend going to Charles's house and playing Super
Hours
Smash
and
Bros.
hours.
with our other lifelong friend and co-host of Charles's Vanity Project, Roger, a Star Wars podcast, Derek. And we love video games. We played a preposterous amount, but I've had it recommended to me actually through more of the lens of, hey, you really like fantasy, right? You're nerdy. Well, video games are nerdy. Read this book.
I just assumed you liked video games. It's like,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Yeah. It's like, that is offensive, but you are right. So
That is offensive, but who's the author? How do you spell it? How do you spell it? No, like, so I can look this up and bookmark it.
Yeah, and that was done to me that I was a victim of the stereotype that nerdy fantasy readers also like video games. But I'm going to take all of that pain and lash out and put it on you, our listeners, by saying you probably like video games too. So,
Yeah, we're assuming most
let's
of you
be real
probably do. And that's kind of, to me, the most interesting thing about this book is that it's about two people who have forged a relationship like over their mutual like interest in video games, and as two people who have also formed their own relationship over video games and are still friends, decades later. It's kind of a fun read for me, and it was one that I was really interested in, and I think it's very successful because of its accurate portrayal. I feel like now that we're in the 2020s, we're in a time period where we can kind of write nostalgia around video games. I feel like 20 years ago it was like video games were still new enough and rising in popularity enough that obviously people have been writing about video games all this time, but this to me was the first time where it's like, wow, we can like write almost like this realistic literary fantasy fiction based in reality about the video game world, and we can pull on that nostalgia and we can pull on those references and then age them up to modern day. And that was a really fascinating, like, new experience for me to read about an area that I'm so intimately knowledgeable of, and it's part of my own life to watch that story being told. I guess these are like Gen X kids kind of growing up playing Super Mario Bros. And then kind of aging them up to about the early 2000s. So I don't know, it was kind of interesting to see that progression, and it was kind of a new vein of fiction for me anyway that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, there's a quote on the back of the book that hopefully I can find here. It's there's sorry, I'm blowing it right now. A lot of dead air going on here.
That's okay.
yeah, someone described it as like, is there such a thing as like the great American video game novel? Because if so, I think that she's done it with this book. And
Interesting.
I swear it's on the back of the book, and there's not that many. Oh, yeah, okay. Nathan Hill, author of The Knick, says, is there such a thing as a great American gamer novel? Because if not, I believe Gabrielle Zevin just invented it. And that is
Right.
pretty accurate. And
It does
it's,
read kind of like where you have to read stories in junior high about like life on the prairie. It's kind of like that. It's like we're now reading about kids trying to hit the top of the flagpole in Super Mario Bros. It's kind of where we
yeah,
progress.
life on the Oregon Trail.
Life on the war. Oh, I see. There you go.
Heyo.
Heyo. See, you. That's why you belong here, man. Well done.
Thank you. Which does play, the Oregon Trail does play a very key role in all of this. But we won't get into that because this is a spoiler free episode, or at least it will be until we'll give you a warning in the last like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, we might dabble
Charles
in
and I will.
reacting to some of the major spoilery moments at the end, but we will keep the spoiler free. It's more of a recommendation episode anyway.
Yeah.
So we'll just keep that going for people. But yeah, you're just so right.
I'll say that part of what inspires us to get into the idea in the last 5 minutes or so of reacting to these big events is that I would say the way that this novel is able to have like huge, emotionally even devastating at times events that hit you hard, like I think that's something that will really reach fantasy fans well. Like this is extremely entertaining is a good word for a lot of it, but also
Yeah.
just will hit you in the feels. And these you don't think of a novel about two friends creating video games together as having huge moments like that,
Mhm.
and even things that are exhilarating and stuff. It's much bigger than just two friends creating video games. It's about their lives and these huge things that happen to people over the course of a life. And there's moments that feel as big as any epic fantasy battle that you're going to read in terms of your own emotional investment in what's happening. And yeah, it is a great fit for fans of fantasy in the sense that like there's a lot more yeah, but like big events or big happenings than you might be thinking. Like when I first picked up this book, I was like, oh, so it's a book about friendship and video games, which appeals to me, but it's also got drama and
Oh, for sure. One of the things
even
that
yeah.
I've learned is like when you have a book like this, whose audience is what I call mass appeal, millions and millions and
Jimmy
millions of
Fallon.
people, Jimmy Fallon level kind of.
She was on Fallon. The author was on, which is
Yes.
why I keep
when
talking
you're
about him.
when you're catering to not just people that really love Tolkien and want a modern voice in fantasy, but you're now catering to all of America, coast to coast kind of appeal. Like, yes, she's writing a really interesting story about video games, but I think to get to that next level that Gabrielle Zevin has gotten to, you also need to bring home a lot of these larger themes because video games can kind of turn some people off. It's like, I don't want to read a book about video games. I don't care about that. But she gets through that because she's telling an honest story about relationships. And let's be real here, there is a lot of juicy drama in this. I
Yeah.
kind of compare it to like Days of Our Lives, where it's like any kind of dramatic thing short of like evil twin kind of scenario happens in this story. And so it's just juicy. And not only is it juicy because that makes it imply that it's like a pulp book, which it's really not. It takes a really interesting literary focus on a lot of different themes. Some of my favorites are sexism in academia, sexism in video games and science, and toxic relationships as well. Those to me are very, very strong. But she also just expands to talk about pretty much everything. It's really interesting to see how she does not hold back on talking about every sort of major emotional kind of feeling and weave it as a theme into this book. And so that's why I can see it just breaks through. It's not just something like, hey, you like video games, read this. And no, it's like, hey, you like a story about a modern story about, two friends and their complicated lives. And it's like, oh yeah, who doesn't want to read that, And that's how you get to Phelan levels.
Yeah. I think that every once in a while you read a book and you're like, this is a novel for our current times. And this is one that is going to dive into tons of big issues relevant to what's going on now. And it doesn't give easy answers about any of those things. In fact, I would say where this book is strongest is probably in its willingness to sit in a lot of the complications, especially because the characters are so, they're vividly realized there, Charles. I would say they're all so complicated. There are no heroes, there are no villains. It's almost like what fantasy fans might be familiar with in the trend toward morally gray characters. Because every single character, from our main two protagonists to even the characters that are very clearly not good people and doing some of the the bad stuff in this novel, then they have their moments where it's like, oh wow, this guy's being pretty decent in this moment, and he's actually the only person that seems to be reacting to this in a reasonable way.
Right.
And meanwhile, that was the character that was doing some pretty horrible stuff that we don't agree with, but earlier in the novel. So it's I think that it's just really great when you get these real feeling characters, even when all of these Days of Our Lives style events are happening to them. They manage to, they never feel cartoonish. The characters are so real feeling. And to also appeal to all you, I hesitate to say grimdark fantasy fans, because that's maybe a step too far, but fans of complicated characters who are morally gray. And I would say even like Joe Abercrombie fans like those complicated character study type moments, or Robin Hobb fans. We're reading Farseer trilogy right now, and the way that you get a character study almost like nothing else I've read of the character study of fifth chivalry in Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. It's like that in the way that you become intimately familiar with especially our two main characters, Sam and Sadie.
How easy would it have been to write a version of the story? It's like, oh, it's about friendship in video games, where she's like the quirky gamer girl and he's like the shy, awkward nerd, and they get together and then they have a falling out, and then they, instead, Gabrielle Zevin chooses a more dramatic approach, and there's a lot of honesty in that. And like you said, we're reading Farseer, or Robin Hobb is not afraid to make her character unlikable at times and make wrong choices and fail sometimes. And this book is about a friendship that spans 30 years more, and from freshmen in college to full on adults. And so there's a lot of history between them,
and further back than
experience.
That, from childhood.
Childhood, right? So you get their whole entire story, and warts and all, essentially. And I think that's that kind of distinction we're trying to say here, is that it's not just like this chosen one, like can't do no wrong, everything's great. It's like, no, this is an honest, real relationship here, and it's not a relationship necessarily in the sense that there's a meet cute and they fall in love and they have a whatever big gesture where they get together at the end, but it's more messy.
Or do they?
But you know what I mean, in terms of it's not like there's that, it's not like a rom-com is what I'm trying to say, where they have that big cutesy moment.
No,
that would
it doesn't
never happen
follow
in real
the
life.
normal beats.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't follow the beats of that. And I believe, this story, it's interesting. At times it is described as a love story. And so let's say another back of the book quote here from Rebecca. I'm not familiar with this author, so apologies if I'm mispronouncing anything. Rebecca Searle, author of In 5 Years. And they described it, they said, it is a book about the intersection between love and friendship, work and vocation, and the impossible and relentless pull of our own westbound destinies. And they go on to say that Zevin is one of our greatest living novelists, and this just may be her magnum opus. Woo. And that is high praise. But anyway, going back, themes of love, intersection between love and friendship, and the way that love is explored in this novel is very different and way more complicated than you would find in a, I don't want trash rom-coms, but they tend to follow a certain
different
formula,
kinds of stories,
and they tend to be more superficial. That's in fact part of what people are looking for, is a little bit more of usually the base, and you all know that they'll get together at the end. This is gonna leave you not knowing what's gonna happen the whole way through in terms of anything to do with love, and I'll leave it at that.
Right. And it's not to say, not dissing anything about rom-coms. It's a different kind of book. Like, this is a drama, 100%.
Yeah.
But what makes
Rom-dram.
Rom-dram. Yeah.
I don't know if I would describe it as that either. Just
a drom-com, but a rom-dram.
There are funny moments in it.
There are, for certain. And there's a lot of fun moments, too. Like, I loved all that as a gamer, I enjoyed all
Charles
of the
is always starting conversations and sentences with that. As a gamer.
As a gamer myself. But, some of the references were a bit older, but I know the history, I know my history. It was great. It was fun. I like to think I picked up on most of them. You could tell that Gabrielle Zevin definitely had a big love and affinity towards video games and video game development and stuff like that. So that was a really fun part to read. But then when you get into the drama, unlike something like Days of Your Lives, where it's just like the most dramatic stuff you could think of just to entertain you, she does weave in these like literary themes and stuff like that. And there's one quote that I don't think is a spoiler that kind of explains all of that, and it's very short, where it's what is a game, Mark said. It's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. It's the possibility of infinite rebirth, infinite redemption. The idea that if you keep playing, you could win. No loss is permanent because nothing is permanent ever. Which is a great line.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It is a great line, and I think that does a great job of illustrating where you can think about games in a superficial manner and it's just mindless fun, or in a book like this that approaches it more almost philosophically, you get moments like that, which is like, why do people at the deepest level like video games?
Right.
Really
like,
thoughtful.
Are video games an escape? Is it a form of expression? Is it a way for two people who can't really communicate really well to still form a bond and a friendship? What are those things like? The very first scene is, kid in the hospital and he hasn't talked, and the only thing that really gets him to open up is sitting next to someone and playing Super Mario and showing them how to get to the top of the flagpole. And it's this idea of like, they never really talked about their experiences or got to know each other, but they did still somehow get to open up and connect. And it's those kind of intricacies that Gabrielle Zevin is able to kind of weave in, where it's not just talking about video games like, oh, we made a video game reference, isn't that crazy? But to actually use it as the glue for a relationship, it is really the winning point here, and something that's very hard to do. And I think that's why so many people are like championing her as like, this is a great novel, she's a novelist, this is fantastic, because she understands themes and character development in a way where she's able to take something like video games and not take the temptation route of just Easter egg reference all the time, which there certainly are in here, but she takes it to that next level of no, here's how you can take these theories of loss and redemption and the cyclical nature of life plus video games. It's very interesting to do that. And I think that's why people are calling her like a modern American novelist, because she's doing
like the
those
great
same
American
things.
video game novel, because when you think of
like
those
Ready Player
kind of,
One or something, where it's
Yeah.
not quite the same. Like that's
No,
a video game
that
book
that people love and feeds on nostalgia, but I think very few would go on to call that the great American gamer novel, because
Right.
it is a little bit more let's have fun with these references and tell an exciting story with tons of action. And this is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is extremely exciting, but it doesn't lean on big action sequences, and it's a little, I would say it goes into greater depth with its exploration of video games.
Right.
And
Right.
that is an interesting thing to do, and something that I'm sure lots of fantasy fans and I know Charles and I can relate to so much. I reference the idea that we used to, Charles, Derek, and I used to go over to Charles's place and just play Super Smash Bros. For hours and hours and hours, just about every weekend. And the level of bond that we were all able to form, doing that, we got so much closer by being united through a pretty silly game.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It's and it's something that laid the foundation for a friendship where Charles and I, many years later, are here doing a fantasy podcast together. And, we were just two groomsmen over at Derek's wedding not that long ago. So it's a kind of thing that I'm sure a lot of fantasy fans can relate to, developing relationships over video games. And this captures that in a way I've never seen before, and we may never see again in fiction. I don't know, maybe we'll see it again.
No, and that's well said, because I think there's a lot of us now in like 2020 who have very similar stories to Dylan, Derek, and I, of like using this kind of media as a way to form a bond, and there's something more unspoken happening between building a relationship, doing something like playing a video game, than actually has anything to do with the game itself. And then as you get older and like the dramas of life happen, how that could affect your relationships with people. So I think any fantasy fan can appreciate that. That certainly the thematic development and the character development are things that you could easily kind of transfer. If you're a video game fan, which, let's be honest, most of you probably are, then there's something here that you could definitely enjoy and take in as well. So like a lot of really interesting things for fantasy fans to kind of dive into and kind of broaden their horizons for. And it's a New York Times bestseller and a Goodreads winner for best fiction. How wrong can you go? I mean, it's kind of long at 400 pages, but for us fantasy fans, that's like below average. Like, we can crank this out, like that's nothing. I see some people on Goodreads being like, it's so long at 400 pages. And I'm like, that is long.
Tell me you're not a fantasy fan without telling me you're not a fantasy fan.
Exactly.
Right?
So
it's like,
you guys can crank this out, no problem. In between your Malazans and your Chihuahua killers, we're reading a book that's like 40 hours long audiobook, where this was like 20 and not even. So it's like that kind of disparity is something that you can appreciate as a fantasy fan for sure.
That's true. It is funny how, for those of us who are reading lots of epic fantasy, it becomes like, ooh, it's a nice palate cleanser to read a book that's only 390 something, almost 400 pages. It's like, ooh, wow, it's a real quick read. And it moves so quickly. I read a lot before bed as kind of a wind down activity. And I know I'm really in love with a book when I end up like, oh no, now this book is making me not able to sleep, rather than this book is helping me kind of wind down and get to sleep. And this was one where I was like, oh no, like this is trouble.
I could see that.
So I
I
was
could
staying
see
up,
that
yeah,
for sure.
I was
All
staying
those
up
days of
really
our lives
late.
moments happening where you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, gotta know what happens next. So
Mm.
it's it is a phenomenal book in general, and I think a good read, which I don't want to say now because it's Goodreads, a great read
Ooh.
for fans of fantasy in many ways. I think it's also what's kind of funny is a parallel between building video games and world building, which I would say
Oh
it
yeah.
kind of shows up
Yeah.
because you're seeing them. It's almost like in the same way that fantasy authors world build, and we're often very interested to hear what was going on in their heads behind why they created certain things. I mean, we've had a million conversations with authors about, oh, hey, yeah, what was going on in your head when you were thinking through creating this
Yeah, your
aspect of your world.
influences, what you wanted
And
to do different, like
yeah,
who were you kind of inspired by, that kind of stuff for sure.
yeah, and you
Great
get
point.
the behind the scenes of that when they're creating these video games. And I think of the
Yeah.
process when they're trying to create their first video game and they're kind of doing it out of their figurative garage, not their
Yeah.
not a literal
Yeah.
garage, but that kind of
Yeah.
startup style. And they're having these conversations of how do we create this world, and they do that with numerous other
Right.
video games over the course of the novels.
They
Create
didn't
a
want their
world in the way
characters,
that
they didn't want to put a
yeah,
gender on their character, and they wanted to use
yeah,
Japanese influence and all these other things, pulling on some of what they wanted to see in video games at the time. One of them being like a woman at MIT in like the 80s or
yeah,
something. So you're like, okay, you can kind of see how that world building kind of mentality is brought into building a world for a video game, and it's written really well, and they're creating a whole lore, and then the success of that game carries on into for decades, into their relationship and how they make new worlds or sequels or stuff like that, which is definitely within the fantasy lexicon for sure.
definitely. And some of the games are basically fantasy in themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a pretty easy fit for fantasy fans to you get a little bit more of like behind the scenes rather than being entrenched in the actual fantasy aspects of it, like the fantasy world yourself. But most fantasy fans have some interest in the process of world building, and you get some of that for sure when they're creating their video games. I mean, I think of even a moment where there's people creating a video game and they want to work with a company, and the people working at the company are like, okay, so this game, they're like vampire zombies. It's like, all right, well, they're gonna have to choose either vampires or zombies or something like
Yeah.
that. And you think
Right.
of that almost as like someone writing a fantasy novel. It's like, all right, like I don't know, can people handle vampire zombies, or is that a good pitch? Is that like a weird cross of
Right.
subgenre here?
Right.
And definitely reminds me of the kind of conversations that folks are still having today. Although I think today we're way more accepting of just wacky stuff like that,
Yeah.
where the idea of like, oh, vampire zombies would be
Right. But also,
probably
yeah.
more likely considered something that like people would be excited about over just your plain old zombies that we've done a million times. But
For
yeah,
sure.
this book,
But
most of it
also
takes
like the
place
implications of
significant.
making an artistic choice is like great. Now we're
Right,
underwater. How did you animate that? Like how do you show
right,
this blood bursting in this way or in that way? Like we'll have to make a whole engine just on water physics, like that kind of stuff. And you're like,
right.
oh, interesting. Like if you want to make it rain, if they want to be like in a storm, those kind of things. You're like, oh, interesting. Like we've had very similar conversations with authors about that in the past, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I'm. The other interesting thing, to read this, us fantasy people, we love our film adaptations, and it might be a while now, given all the strikes going on in Hollywood. But last year, Paramount Pictures did purchase the film rights for $2 million, and they're working with Zevin is writing the script right now, so who knows? We might get some kind of tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow film or show or something in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe. Hopefully, we'll see, depending on how long the strike goes on for. But yeah, it's just another reason to dive in. The only other thing, should we carve out some time for a spoiler warning and just react to a couple things? Because there's a couple things I just wanted to. We haven't talked about this book yet, and I thought it might be fun to just kind of react to some of these big.
Yeah.
Whoa moments,
Yeah, let's put a knot on this this conversation of what should fantasy fans read, or would they like whatever we're calling this tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. They say put a knot. They say put a bow, don't they? Put a bow on this.
I know what you meant. You did say put a knot, and I was like, okay, let's knot it up.
Double knot.
Let's double knot this bad boy.
Let's Velcro this together, and the shoe that is this conversation. Let's just make it Velcro and snap that. And anyway, let's. I'm sorry, I've lost my way. I wish you made edits to these episodes, but.
No,
I know that this whole thing,
want, man. So should fantasy fans read tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow? Yes. If anything we said sounds interesting to you, then yes. If none of it sounds interesting, you don't have to read it. That's fine. But we both read it. We both enjoyed it. We both recommend it. Great character work. Great thematic development. Great use of video games as a thematic device, which is just very rare. Nothing quite like it. I haven't read anything quite like it. It's like Little House on the Prairie, except instead of the prairie, it's Stardew Valley and Super Mario Bros.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Yeah, I'll double down. Should fantasy fans read this book? Yeah, everyone should, right? Why not? But sure. Fantasy fans in particular, I think, for all the reasons that we've mentioned previously, meaning the overlap between fantasy fans, video game fans, the vividly realized characters that are morally gray, even if they're not really often dealing with like huge war-related decisions or anything like that in the way that many fantasy characters are. They're still living their lives in ways that feel so human, and they're flawed in ways that we tend to enjoy from modern fantasy. There's no clear heroes, no clear villains. And I think that the world building aspects that we've talked about, she's also got fantastic voice, I'll say, which we didn't really get into, but she has a very unique writing style. She makes some interesting creative choices that
she really swings for the fences.
Yeah, so I think that fantasy fans will feel at home reading a book like this, even if it's not strictly it's not all in the fantasy genre.
That's well said. Yeah, there are a lot of big swings that may be more commonplace in fantasy, like changing up the narrative style as dramatically as Gabrielle Zevin does in this book. That it's another great parallel for sure. She goes for it, for everything.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot left on the table that she didn't kind of try and swing for in this book, and succeeded in. So, well said.
Mm-hmm. You too, Charles. Shall we get into some spoilers here?
Let's get into it.
Yeah, give a spoiler warning. It feels kind of weird for this one. But yeah, we're about to have a no-holds-barred, 5-minute conversation about Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. So, if you haven't yet read the book, if anything we said earlier sounds appealing, go pick it up. It's such a great read. And then come back and listen to these last 5 minutes or so, because there's just certain things that we feel like we have to react to and have to discuss, because, like Charles said, we haven't had any of these conversations yet.
So we're getting into it now. So if you're fumbling for your phone. Like, for those of you that haven't read it, we're done here. Thank you so much. We're not gonna like come back later and talk about more spoiler-free stuff. We're done. For those of you that have read the book or are still interested in our spoiler takes, even if you haven't, we're getting into it now. You've had your time to try.
And those of you that were doing dishes and had to dry your hands and all that before pause, I think we've given you enough time. So.
I think so too. Like, seriously, guys, we're really about to get into some spoiler scenes here. Like, I don't, some things that you just want to go in blind for. So, like, this is it. We're getting into it right now. So, one of the things, Dylan, that kind of my only, dare I say, criticism of this
starting
book,
with the criticism.
It's not.
We just
really,
lauded it for a while.
I mean, I really like this book, so it's not really a criticism, but it's the closest thing to a criticism that I'm gonna have, and it's that she really, went for a lot in terms of the drama, right? I mean, it's like you've got people in comas, you've got 9/11s, you've got shootings, you've got all this other crazy stuff happening, and there's times that I'm like, man, she's really juicing the drama. There's certain themes that she nailed really well. Like, I loved all of the stuff when they were in college and all the sexism and then the toxic relationships and things like that.
Charles loved the sexism.
Well, it was just a really great
he loved the depiction of
it. Yeah, I mean, it was really good because I don't like sexism at all on it, but it was a great depiction of it, and especially in something like the video game industry and MIT and just science and engineering in general, and the predatory behavior of one of her professors. It all weaved in super, super well. And then on the other side, you have the other character who has like disability and stuff like that I thought was weaved in super well too. And then like the second half of the book, when they aged them up, it kind of gets a little crazy in terms of like all the crazy drama that goes on in their lives. And I don't know what you felt about some of these things, but I was like, wow, we're really now in a soap opera level of drama at the back half of this book. Rarely are people's lives this exciting.
Yeah, that's fair. It would be a very unusually eventful, in a mostly traumatic way, life for someone to live. But people do live lives that are like this, so it's but it would be an outlier for sure. I mean, in the sense that I don't know, it's tough. I'm mixed on this, Charles, because I think part of her including everything was what had me staying up really late at night needing to read more. Like when Marks got shot and like, is this guy seriously gonna die?
Yeah.
Like it just didn't feel like that kind of book. And suddenly it's like this guy got
shooting because they had a gay character in the video game and that made the person angry and they just wanted to shoot up the office.
I think it was
like,
the guy was really mad. Like, obviously, he was being homophobic and stuff, but he was really mad because of the fact that his wife or
girlfriend
someone, like, met someone on the game and, like, got married to them in the game and ended up, like, leaving them. So they were definitely, like, racist and homophobic people, but what pushed them to the shooting, I think, was that extra push.
Yeah,
but
she does try to weave in that a little bit, and she does successfully do it, but to me it was like, we're doing a lot here. Do we really need like a school shooting or like an office shooting scene? I don't know. I guess we do.
And it does feel like shootings are a thing that's very much in the public consciousness right now, and I think it's like we're having a lot of discussions about that, and then it does start to feel like hey, I'm on Gabrielle's team in the sense like of most of the issues that she's discussing, but also it's like, oh well, okay, we need to get into this one as well, there's a sense of that, but again, it's like, I don't know, that drama was juicy, and
it was very juicy.
Enjoyed it, and it's kind of a moment that's like, it takes this book to a place though that's like, whoa, I just did not think we would be getting like shootings in a
Right.
book that is about like people creating video games. Like
Right.
maybe someone
Right.
dies, right? But you get this more like, oh, if Marx dies, it's from like a disease or like
Right.
something, and we'd explore it through that lens and how
Yeah.
that affects everyone. But it's like, no, there's straight up like people shooting other people in real life, not video game
And
life.
just like so suddenly and unexpected for like not even great reasons. He wasn't even supposed to be in there. Like all these kinds of things that made it happen, that made it so juicy.
And he's literally like jumping in front of someone else like a hero out of an action movie.
Yeah.
You know, like
Exactly.
that's how he
A
dies.
guy who didn't listen to what he said either. He was
Right.
like, leave, and then the guy was like, no, and then now he's like, well, now I got to go save you because you didn't listen, and then I'm the one that's going to get shot. Like that.
And it's like the most noble, like heroic character. Like Marx obviously has a few flaws, but he is the most like straightforward good guy in the whole
sure.
book, I would
For
say,
sure.
by a because Sam, like part of what I love about Sam and Sadie is they are so intensely flawed, but flawed in ways that make sense given their experiences. I think especially Sam is like experienced so much trauma and had such a rough upbringing and had so few actual close relationships in his life that didn't end in grief or betrayal.
Right.
That
Right.
it's like it makes sense he's the way he is, but he's
So good.
so flawed and at times unlikable. And it's like, but Marx is pretty much just an all-around good guy who's maybe a little bit of a philanderer or whatever, right?
Right.
Like that's his greatest flaw, and even that is like, oh no, everyone likes him after they're done with
Yeah.
a relationship,
And he's
with
like,
him.
his
so
best friend's
nice.
girl
It's like-
kind of situation
Yeah.
too. But, that was juicy as well. And yeah, to have him just go down, and an interesting way they describe it too. And I don't know if you listen to the audiobook at all, but when they do
did
the
not.
chapter where it's like, you're a bird, like the whole narration was a woman voice actor doing the whole narration. That chapter was a different voice, and it was a male's voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you're listening and you're like,
That's
what the
interesting.
heck is happening? And you're like, you're a bird and you're flying, and then you like get shot down or something, and this is the end. Oh, well. And then you're like, oh, we're actually in the voice. Like, this is Marx's perspective, like that kind of. It was an interesting device, and that was like it. It was back to the female narrator when we're outside of Marx's perspective. But it was a nice little detail, and it was a nice touch. And as much as I say like, oh, she put so much in here, it's all entertaining. Like, I get why she did it. It's just interesting and fun and shocking to read. It's what makes a soap opera so addictive and good. It's like stuff just keeps happening, and it's grounded in these characters that we've gotten to know for so long, so that when these things happen to them, there's other layers going on here, and it's executed in a way that's really smart. It's just, to me, it's like the main criticism, people being like, oh, it's so long, and it's like all these stuff. To me, there's just like clearly themes that are way more developed than others. Doesn't make it any better or worse. Doesn't make the book good or bad. It's just kind of funny where it's like really swinging for the fences. And then there's that chapter with the bird, and there's the other chapter where they're like in the video game. And
Oh yeah,
forming
that's how
a
she went for a
relationship
moment,
with-
and probably the like least interesting and like entertaining and most jarring part of the book. Like
Right.
my partner was just reading the book. She just finished it like yesterday or a couple days ago, and she got to that part and she was like, this is like not good. Like, did you like this? Like, did you like this part? Like, she loved the book as a whole, but you meant like the parts where they're in the video game. And I think it's like, it's not even that it's not like I didn't find it well written or didn't find it good, but it's just like it comes right at the sort of tail end of a book that has not done that to that point. Like, it never did anything quite like that. And then you're like, wait, what's happening? And you're almost, for me, I was like, how much of this book is left? And we're spending all this time doing this?
And it's long.
So,
It's long. That's the only thing. Like, it's kind of clever, right? Because here's a guy, Sam, who like cannot communicate his feelings at all, and he just makes this whole elaborate video game to like entrap her and develop a relationship with her, and like that, which is so much more difficult than
beautiful
just calling someone on the phone and saying, "Hey, I miss you. Like, maybe we should hang out sometime. Maybe form some kind of relationship." No, and instead he just does this whole elaborate scheme, and then of course when she finds out about it, she's kind of turned off by it, and that further ruins and complicates their relationship. So it's like that part is super, super interesting, but then it's like, oh, I'm going to tell it from the perspective of being in the game, and I'm going to do like multiple days of her making board games and selling them in town, and we're going to like get their day to day for pages and pages and pages. And it's like, do we need that? Like, really? But then it's like video games are an escape, so maybe we do. Like you can kind of get that's what she's going for. But the fact it only happens once so randomly, like right at the end of the book, and it doesn't really impact, like you could skip that chapter and be fine.
You could skip to like the last few pages of the chapter where it's clear that he like made the game and and tricked her and all of that stuff.
Right. Which is a testament to love, but it's also super creepy and like deceitful as well. So you're like,
it's a weird.
Only someone who knows you so intimately and also is super talented at developing games could pull off this huge gesture. It's
that like tons of people were playing, and he just made it for his friend to try to like interact with her because he misses her and feels bad but can't communicate. And
right.
That's and it's weird. It's funny, like then I don't really know how to pronounce her ex-boyfriend professor's name, like Dove or whatever.
It is Dove.
He. From the audiobook. That's where the audiobook comes in handy. It's like D-O-V. I'm like, I think that's Dove.
It's Dove.
Anyway, then he's like, I don't know. That sounds kind of like a romantic gesture to me, and it's like. In a way, it kind of is like, but also what's kind of cool about the relationship is that they don't end up together at the end. And you even think like, oh, isn't this an easy setup for that where, oh, now Marx is dead and he's out of the picture, and that clears the way for like Sam to come in, and they finally get together and they raise the kid. And then she just doesn't do that. Which is, to me, actually like a strength of this book, because it's so easy. It would be so easy to do that. But also it's like, in some ways, and she gets into this toward the end, like in some ways their relationship is like almost like deeper, or at least more unique and special in some ways than like a romance. Because I think she says something toward the sense of like, oh, I could be in a relationship with anyone. Like I could share that with anyone. I've shared that with multiple people in my life. And she's like, I can only like create in this way with you. Yeah. And like, maybe in some ways they can never quite like see eye to eye, just interacting as people or coworkers or whatever. But there's some magic in the way that they connect at first through like playing video games together, and then through creating video games together, that relationship is just can't be replicated in the way that like she could theoretically meet another person down the line that she loves just as much as Marx, and they raise a kid together. But it's like there's something special about their creative relationship that
and they just know each other at such a level and to such an extent that they can create together, like you mentioned, where she says like, oh, I can only create like this with you, and there's some intimacy there that just interestingly does not translate to an intimacy like in a relationship. And like they come close a couple times, or maybe the opportunity presents itself multiple times, and it just never works out. And it's just really great character work and character development, that it's like these characters are more intimate than like anyone else, yet they never get together, and there's many reasons why they can't, because they're, again,
it'd be a disaster.
It would be a disaster. And they're two very headstrong people, like very opinionated, very successful, but also there's just stuff that's happened in their past that could never be reconciled in that way. It's Sam is just kind of that deceit that he's done. It was a gesture of love, but when you consider Sam's like romantic background and things like that, it's very well developed and very, very interesting, and that's what makes it great. And one of my favorite moments is around like following the Donkey Kong machine at the end and getting it delivered to her house or her office and stuff like that, and then she's going back to MIT and doing guest lectures and finding new purpose in that, and Sam's staying in California and doing the whole business end and kind of being more of a recluse. It's like, they're kind of finding their natural paths. Getting together doesn't make sense, and there's like some kind of finality to that feels good. It's like a great way to end this story.
But to leave that like last bit hanging where she gives him a game she's been working on again, like parallel to the
right, and she finds out that like he didn't play her game before or something like that, like a different game was in the box. Remember there was that whole betrayal. Oh, well, like
there was, so that whole thing was that there's something on the I guess like where the cartridge was being stored that would indicate that her and Dove were together.
Right.
And Sam knew that she was like super depressed, and like he ended up giving her the game, or so it was Dove's game. Dove's game, and like Dead Sea or whatever it was called, and Sam was inspired in some way with like Ichigo by playing Dead Sea, by using Sadie's copy of Dead Sea. So
and when
Sadie was like, wait, for you to play Dead Sea, you had to open it, and that would have shown you on like where the cartridge was stored. That would have shown you that like Dove wrote this note that meant we had been intimately together. And then you sent me back to Dove to like get his help with the engine of our game,
like put her at
knowing
risk.
that I was depressed over probably a breakup with Dove.
Right.
And then later, though, Marx is like, actually, like, I was the one who took the game out. Like, we did play it, but I don't think Sam saw that.
Sam wouldn't have done that, if he had known, He didn't
but
put
then
the game
Sam
over
is like, but then Sam, even when she confronts him, Sam doesn't deny it because he's so freaking like, like bad at communicating.
Much more jaded
also,
at that point, too, though. We're talking about decades later.
Because instead of him being like, I didn't even do that or whatever, I'm pretty sure he's just like, so what if I did that? Like, who cares? We made a good game. Like, and then it's only later Marx is like, hey, actually Sam didn't do that. So it's like, it's so interesting. And you're left, it's still, I guess, kind of ambiguous whether or not Sam, like maybe Marx misremembered. Maybe Marx was defending his friend.
Or maybe
blah, blah, blah.
Sam could have inferred and knew anyway and still sent it, like that.
But that's
totally
what's beautiful about this book and the characters is like, Sam probably would do that, but did he? And Sadie's also like being like she was like assuming that he did that when she didn't know for sure, and that like ruined their relationship that he supposedly did that, and she never communicated that to him. And it's like people do that kind of stuff all the time, and that's part of why they feel so real, and they're both flawed enough where it's like making sense, and it would make sense even if Sam did that and blah blah blah. But I don't know, there's just something where like when do you get characters that are
and when do you get
like
situations like
but also
that are
well
so
understood
and developed, it's like crazy. Like just that one situation is one of like a million things going on in this book all at once. I don't even know how Gabrielle Zevin pulled it off within her page count, just the amount of intricate complexities, not even going on like narratively with the characters, but also with the themes and the relationships. That's what makes it kind of like a next level story. So yeah, it was interesting. Like again, lots of fun stuff, like lots of entertaining stuff was still able to happen, and that's good. Like this could have easily just been misery on top of misery on top of misery. And it kind of is, but it's also very entertaining and endearing and things like that as well. Like these characters do find happiness in their own way, and you like when these things happen, you are shocked, but you're also like, I gotta see what happens next. I gotta turn the page. This is kind of fun, So
it never loses its sense of humor, and the characters in a weird way like never lose their senses of humor. Not in a weird way that doesn't make sense, but in a fun way, where even when she's pissed at Sam for creating this whole game and blah blah blah, she has her character die, and then on the tombstone she has it read like she hath died of dysentery, which is their inside joke. So it's like these characters have so much like, even when they betray each other, they have so much like love and caring for each other that she's like, well, I'm pissed at Sam and I'm done playing this game and I'm like not going to talk to him, but she's like, oh, but he's going to find this funny.
And also just kind of like these two professionals at the top of their game, right? Like leaving Easter eggs for each other. Like, I'm still smart enough to do this. And like, isn't this a very clever thing I was able to pull off that only you would understand based off of layers of complexity of our relationship? Like you can't help yourself at a certain point to come up with this like master plan. I could totally see myself doing that. Like, I'm pissed at you, but this joke's too funny to pass up on, and you're the only person, it's an audience of one, right, that this joke would land for, so I'm still gonna do it. It's like, I hate you, but I'll see you next week. Well, I think we've said it all. We got to get that off of our chests, with all the spoiler goodies. And you remember when we said it was going to be 5 minutes?
It's probably closer to 15.
But who's counting?
Who is counting?
It was fun. And it was a great book. Very talented author for sure. I hope, I'm interested to see what they come out with next. You could tell that they were kind of swinging for the fences with some of the things. And now off the back of all this success, who knows what they're going to feel comfortable like swinging for and diving into. Like, this is clearly an author that likes to take risks as well as develop characters and themes, and those are all things that I really enjoy. So I'm looking forward to the next work. Yeah,
I expect to read whatever she comes out with next. I was thinking of picking up the book that she wrote, The Storied Life of A.J. Thickery or whatever, but I don't know. I'll pick it up at some point. I don't know when. But
maybe you should write a book about two people that have a successful podcast and then all the tumultuous relationship over the years.
Well, I hope that we never have to experience anything near the level of trauma that these two characters do have to experience, because
hopefully our lives are much more boring.
You don't want to have that interesting life. You have an interesting life, but not interesting enough to be as interesting as this book.
For sure. We don't need the comas and the shootings and the essay and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but for now though, we've got a great show here, great book, great conversation. Always nice to dabble into the larger literary fiction. And stay tuned for next time, where we'll probably talk about something more grounded in the fantasy genre.
Yeah, probably Farseer.
Hopefully Farseer. I mean, we've got some interesting interviews coming up, like you never know. But hopefully Farseer, maybe Friends Pitching Fantasy, now that we've finished Farseer. Who knows? Anything could be happening, but it's all going to be happening here. But it can't happen until after we play that sweet, sweet outro music. What do you say we get that pumping, Dylan?
Let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping, Charles.
All right. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you like what you heard today and you want to support the show and give us, start a conversation over on the socials, go ahead and reach out to us on Instagram at the FTF Podcast and Twitter at the FTF Podcast with
What's Twitter,
one
Charles?
At the end. People are still calling it Twitter. That's how people are saying it. That's what it's going to be until further notice. Now, Dylan, if they like what they heard today,
I'm Team Twitter.
Want to support the show even more than talking to us over on Instagram and Twitter, or X if you insist upon it. Call it X. What else can they do?
I don't insist, but I will say I was watching a Yankees game. Though I'm a Mets fan. Got that wrong. and they were like, oh, like, follow us over on X. And they put X in quotations. I was like, it's happening. So,
Wow.
I don't know.
haven't
I'm not
experienced,
happy
like,
about
a
it.
public X yet, you know? I'm still hearing Twitter, like on the news and articles.
Right,
and
but
stuff.
it's going to change. I'm not happy about it, but I'm just telling you, in a couple years, everyone's going to say X. But anyway, you can toss 5 stars to our podcast over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Spotify is where most of you are listening, so just 2 clicks over at the top of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast feed, and it helps us so much when you do that. You can also rate and or review, as I said, on Apple Podcasts, and those reviews, you can write nice things about us. Someone just wrote something very nice, and it puts a smile on my face when you do that, and presumably on Charles's face as well. But just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Well said, Dylan. Just listening, all the smiles and everything that's all happening. Thank you all so much. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.